We begin here in Japan, where the governor of Osaka is asking the central government to issue an emergency declaration for the prefecture. The number of coronavirus infections has been rising there in recent weeks, due partly to a more contagious variant.
We are facing an extremely severe situation, considering the number of new cases and the strain on the medical system. Therefore, we have decided to ask the central government to declare a state of emergency.
Yoshimura says the measures should remain in place for 3 weeks to a month. The request comes as officials in the prefecture reported 1,153 new infections, a record high for a Tuesday. Health authorities are asking hospitals to secure more beds amid a shortage. 254 have been set aside for severe COVID-19 cases, but 302 people are in serious condition. The central government is sending 90 nurses to help. Experts say a more infectious variant is replacing the original strain of the virus in Osaka and neighboring prefectures. It's leaving more young people in intensive care. Experts say about half of the patients who were recently put on ECMO heart and lung machines were aged 50 or under.
People in their 30s, 40s, and 50s are getting seriously ill, while elderly people continue to develop serious symptoms. That's why we are short of beds for patients with severe conditions.
Osaka officials want to further restrict the movement of people to get the situation under control. They plan to ask bars and restaurants, department stores, and amusement parks to shut temporarily. Officials in neighboring Hyogo Prefecture will meet on Wednesday about whether to request the state of emergency there. The Prime Minister met with relevant members of his cabinet on Tuesday evening, but no decision has been made.
We will take a close look at the situation, consider specific virus measures, and make a decision quickly.
The number of new infections is also on the rise here in the capital. Officials reported 711 cases on Tuesday. That's an increase of more than 200 from a week ago. Tokyo Governor Koike Yuriko says given the situation, she needs to request an emergency declaration as soon as possible. The head of the World Health Organization says more than 5.2 million coronavirus cases were reported across the globe last week, a record high. He says the number of people succumbing to COVID-19 is also on the rise.
It took 9 months to reach 1 million deaths, 4 months to reach 2 million, and 3 months to reach 3 million deaths.
Tedros told reporters hospitalizations are increasing among people aged 25 to 59. He says more transmissible variants and more social activity may be to blame. In Washington, the State Department says it'll start reviewing its 4-tier travel advisory starting this week due to the coronavirus. It says about 80% of countries around the world will get a level 4, which is a do not travel designation. Officials say the change will better reflect the standards set by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. They say factors such as testing capacity will be taken into consideration. Japan has a level 3 or reconsider travel designation. It's unclear whether it will be elevated to the strictest category. Now, India's capital has entered a week-long lockdown to deal with a spike in coronavirus infections. The country's medical system has been overwhelmed, with new cases topping 200,000 for the 6th day in a row. New Delhi officials are requiring residents to refrain from non-essential outings. All public places have been shut down, including schools, shopping malls, and theaters. The surge in India began last month. The country reported over 250,000 new cases on Tuesday, along with a record 1,761 deaths. Hospital intensive care units are almost fully occupied. The capital is also facing alarming shortages of health infrastructure and devices such as ventilators. To tackle the shortage of medical facilities, the government is creating makeshift COVID-19 care facilities on vacant lots or in shuttered hotels. Even a few rail cars have been converted. The Indian government is also ramping up its vaccination drive. It announced on Monday all citizens over the age of 18 will be eligible for vaccinations starting May 1st. The Myanmar military has been increasing its control over free speech by detaining journalists, including foreign nationals. The Japanese government is demanding the prompt release of a Japanese journalist who was taken into custody by security forces. Officials at the embassy in Myanmar learned from local police Kitazumi Yuki had been detained Sunday on suspicion of spreading misinformation. The applicable law was set by the State Administration Council, which was established by the military after the coup. The law makes it possible to detain suspects without a warrant. Kitazumi could face up to 3 years in prison if convicted. He's reportedly being detained at Yangon's insane prison. Police say he suffered no injuries. The embassy officials have denounced the detention, calling it unjustified, and are seeking permission to meet with him in person. This expert on Myanmar pointed out his detention could be prolonged.
It is significant that the security forces detained Kitazumi, even though they knew he was Japanese before his arrest. It's a chilling effect. By detaining one person, other journalists and foreigners will be more cautious. They may be aiming for such an effect.
Myanmar's military has been intensifying its crackdown on media outlets, stripping them of licenses and detaining executives. Japan's Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide has briefed members of the Diet on his recent visit to the United States. Suga spoke about a reference to Taiwan in a joint statement he issued with President Joe Biden over the weekend. Their post-summit statement was the first by leaders of Japan and the U.S. to refer to Taiwan in over 50 years. Suga faced questions in the Diet on Tuesday about the visit. A lawmaker from the main opposition, Constitutional Democratic Party, noted how the statement may change the situation regarding the Taiwan Strait.
Japan expects that the issue surrounding Taiwan will be resolved peacefully by direct dialogue between the two sides. The statement clarifies Japan's position as one that's shared by the U.S. and has significance for peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait.
A lawmaker from the main governing Liberal Democratic Party asked Suga what he discussed with Biden, who considers China his country's most serious competitor.
We exchanged views on China's influence and agreed to oppose any attempts to forcibly change the status quo in the East and South China Seas.
Suga said they also reaffirmed the need for frank dialogue with China and agreed to seek stability in international relations. Sources tell NHK the Chinese military is suspected of ordering hackers to target hundreds of entities in Japan, including the country's space agency and defense-related firms. Investigative sources say the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA, suffered a cyber attack in 2016. An agency official confirmed the attack to NHK and said there was no damage, such as data leaks. Police in Tokyo have identified a Chinese national who had leased servers in Japan that were allegedly used in the attack. He's said to be a Chinese Communist Party member in his 30s and a computer engineer. He allegedly rented a server 5 times using aliases. Police found the server's ID and other credentials were then passed on to a Chinese hacker group known as TIC. The group is said to have attacked JAXA using the IDs. Tokyo police suspect the Chinese People's Liberation Army ordered the cyber attacks. They say about 200 companies and research institutions were targeted. The Chinese national is no longer in Japan, but police sent his case to prosecutors on Tuesday. Sources told NHK authorities questioned him on a voluntary basis, and he admitted to using false names to rent the server. But they say there wasn't enough evidence to build a case. Now, another Chinese national also reportedly rented servers under false names in Japan. He was a student allegedly working under the instruction of the bureau in charge of cyber attacks inside the People's Liberation Army. He also left Japan after being questioned. A Chinese official says he wasn't aware of the issue and criticized how Japan has handled it.
Cyber attack investigations should be based on evidence, not on guesses or speculation. We firmly oppose using the issue for political purposes as a way to condemn China.
Tokyo police continue to investigate the case. Turning now to Vienna, where talks to revive the 2015 deal to curb Iran's nuclear program appear to be showing signs of progress. Tehran and Washington have been talking indirectly through European Union officials in Vienna since early April. U.S. President Biden hopes to rejoin the deal. His predecessor withdrew in 2018 and instead reimposed sanctions against Iran. Tehran hit back by enriching uranium at levels far beyond those set in the accord. The current negotiations center on lifting U.S. sanctions and limiting Iran's nuclear development. On Monday, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Saeed Khatibzadeh said his country is trying to present a draft to get the talks concluded. Still, he acknowledged the gap between Tehran and Washington remains wide. Iranian negotiators told NHK final stage talks will likely happen by late May, ahead of a nuclear inspection deadline agreed with the International Atomic Energy Agency. Shifting to the weather, rain and snow are on the menu for parts of Europe over the next couple of days. Our meteorologist Jonathan Oh explains the situation for there and elsewhere in our World Weather Report.
Hello, listeners. We're going to be dealing with rain and snow in different parts of Europe, particularly for the north and eastern areas of the continent as we go through Tuesday into Wednesday. We have a front that's pushing through the Scandinavian peninsula, and that's going to help to bring some of that snow, while another low off toward the east bringing in some wet weather. So looking at that combination, but we are talking about some warm weather as some air from the south comes in, so those southerly winds helping to push temperatures up. But for the next 24 hours, notice as scattered here or there, looking at the chances that are mainly focused toward the east into places like Moscow, and also looking at some rain to Kyiv and Warsaw as we head toward Wednesday. But look at this, highs near 20 coming up on Wednesday in places like Paris and also into Vienna. So we are looking at a warm boost in terms of temperatures, but again, wet weather expected for especially the north and east as we go through the day Wednesday. Meanwhile, as we look at what's happening with Surige, this typhoon, a very strong system, is continuing to spin its wheels off the coast of the Philippines, particularly off of Luzon. The eastern coastal area is still dealing with those strong winds and the high waves. The storm will still remain in this general vicinity at least for the next couple of days. We have to go toward late Thursday and Friday before it starts to make its turn toward the east. And as it gets some resistance and hits some cooler waters, it is expected to weaken into a severe tropical storm by the time we head into the weekend. Across Japan, we're looking at a nice day coming up on Wednesday for most of the country as we have high pressure dominating the weather pattern. Some places will be in the mid-20s, and it's definitely on the warmer side here. And up toward the north in places like Hokkaido, we're looking at highs into the mid-teens by the end of this week. Sapporo from 11 to 16 by Friday. Tokyo, you're looking at a high of 27 on Thursday, so definitely warming up with mid-20s. I was expected to Osaka and Fukuoka for the rest of the week. Hope you have a good day wherever you are.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has addressed the nation, urging people to stay indoors and not to spread virus panic. His comments come as India reels from a severe second wave of COVID-19. The US is waiting for the outcome of the trial in Minneapolis of Derek Chauvin, the former police officer charged with murdering George Floyd. President Biden has confirmed he's spoken to the Floyd family, and he said the evidence against Chauvin was overwhelming. The army in Chad says President Idris Deby has been killed by rebels on the front line. It comes hours after provisional election results showed him on course to win a sixth term in office. And lawyers for the proposed European Super League say they've issued injunctions they hope will prevent players or clubs being banned from other competitions. The lawyers say the papers have been filed with the relevant courts.